The War Council chamber aboard Apex Station hummed with tension, its walls lined with holographic projections of collapsing star systems. The assembled coalition representatives, an assortment of species with elongated limbs, scaled hides, or bioluminescent features, spoke in urgent, overlapping voices, their words translating into crisp, dispassionate English through the station's neural interface. At the edge of the room, Captain Jack Miller stood with his arms crossed, his weathered face set in an expression of wary detachment. His squad was the only fully human presence in the chamber, a fact that had been emphasized by the looks of skepticism from the aliens since they'd arrived. Humanity had stayed out of the Ravern War for too long, watching from the sidelines while the rest of the galaxy burned. Now they had been dragged in, and the coalition made no effort to hide their doubt. Humans, the angular, crystalline form of General Karev addressed the group, his voice resonating like shattering glass. Your delegation is late to the war. We will not sugarcoat the truth. Your species has limited experience in interstellar combat, and your technology is primitive by comparison. You are a desperate addition, nothing more. Jack's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He'd been briefed on the coalition's arrogance and their simmering resentment of humanity's isolationism. What they failed to grasp, however, was the particular flavor of defiance that comments like Karev's ignited in men like him. Beside him, Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez stifled a snort, his eyes flicking to Jack for permission to respond. Jack gave the barest shake of his head, and Marcus settled back, smirking. The hologram shifted to display a massive, chitinous fleet, a sea of black, pulsating forms bristling with organic weaponry. The Ravern will strike the Coalition core systems within 5 standard hours, Karev continued, gesturing to the projection. This planet, Zixer 7, houses one of their command nodes. It is heavily fortified. Destroying it will disrupt their hive mind coordination long enough for our forces to regroup. Your assignment is to infiltrate and neutralize it. Jack's brow furrowed. He'd heard of the Ravern, an insectoid hive mind that adapted to every tactic thrown at it, crushing species after species beneath its relentless advance. The sheer scale of the enemy before him was daunting, but it wasn't what unsettled him. What gnawed at him was the Coalition's lack of flexibility. They were throwing humanity into this mission not as an asset, but as cannon fodder, hoping for a miracle. Let me get this straight, Jack said finally, his voice calm but carrying enough steel to make several nearby aliens glance his way. You want 5 humans to infiltrate a planet crawling with those things, break through a fortress, and dismantle a command node, all in 5 hours. Karev's crystalline face caught the light as he turned, his expression unreadable. If you are unwilling, we will find another way. I didn't say we wouldn't do it, Jack replied, his gaze steady. But don't expect us to do it your way. The general stiffened, but Jack had already turned back to his squad. Marcus was still smirking, his dark eyes gleaming with anticipation. Corporal Sam Buzz O'Connor stood with his arms folded, rocking slightly on his heels, his face lit with the same reckless confidence that had made him both the best and most infuriating pilot Jack had ever commanded. Behind them, Private Dwayne Heavy Carter shifted his massive frame, his calm demeanor masking the analytical mind that made him indispensable. Finally, Dr. Ethan Harper, the lone civilian, stood apart, adjusting his glasses as his sharp gaze took in every detail of the briefing. We're in, Jack said, glancing back at Karev. But let's be clear. We'll do this mission our way. No micromanagement. No second-guessing. The general's crystalline edges pulsed with irritation, but after a moment, he inclined his head. Very well. But understand this. Failure means extinction. Jack didn't bother responding. He turned to his squad, his voice dropping low. All right, listen up. We're dealing with a hive mind, adaptable, relentless, and predictable in its rigidity. That's their strength and their weakness. They'll expect us to follow the same patterns the Coalition has been throwing at them for years. We're going to hit them where it hurts, and we're going to do it with ingenuity. Buzz grinned. Translation. We're about to rewrite the playbook. Exactly, Jack replied. Marcus, I want you on tech. Figure out how to hack, disable, or repurpose anything we come across. Heavy, you're on firepower. Clear a path when needed. but keep it controlled. Buzz, you'll get us in and out. Make it flashy, but don't get us killed. And Doc, he turned to Harper, who raised an eyebrow. I'll need your brain on overdrive. Anything the rest of us can't think of, you will. Harper nodded, his expression thoughtful. A hive mind is only as strong as its central processing. If we can disrupt their synchronization, even for a few minutes, we'll have an opening. Jack clapped a hand on his shoulder. Good. That's what we're counting on. As the team filed out of the council chamber, Jack lingered for a moment, his eyes fixed on the holographic projection of the Ravern fleet. The odds were absurdly stacked against them, but it wasn't the first time humanity had faced impossible circumstances. If the Coalition had made one mistake, it was underestimating what humans could do under pressure. Outside the chamber, Buzz was already cracking jokes. 5 hours to save the galaxy. No pressure, right? Marcus chuckled. Yeah, and no fancy alien gadgets either. Just us, a pile of duct tape, and Harper's brain. Jack allowed himself a faint smile. They were right. This was absurd, but it was also why they'd been brought in. The Coalition fought by road, by committee. Humanity thrived in chaos. As they reached the hangar, Jack called them to a halt. One last thing, he said, his voice steady. This isn't just about survival. It's about showing them who we are. They think we're expendable. Let's prove we're unstoppable. The squad responded with nods and murmurs of agreement, the air around them crackling with determination. Jack turned toward the waiting shuttle, his resolve hardening with every step. In 5 hours, they would either be dead, or they would change the course of galactic history. Failure wasn't an option. Humanity's entry into the war would be unforgettable. The shuttle rattled violently as it tore through Zixer 7's atmosphere, its reinforced hull groaning in protest. Inside, the team strapped into their seats, silent except for the occasional beep of Marcus's terminal as he recalibrated the shuttle's cloaking device. Outside the viewport, the darkened skies were lit by the eerie green glow of Ravern bio-turrets scanning the horizon like watchful sentinels. Buzz wrestled with the controls, sweat beading on his forehead. This thing flies like a drunk walrus, he muttered, his voice tinged with frustration. He twisted the joystick sharply, narrowly avoiding a cluster of floating mines. Focus, Buzz, Jack said from the co-pilot's seat, his eyes scanning the terrain. We've got one shot at this. Behind them, Marcus leaned over his console, his fingers dancing across alien symbols. Cloaks holding, but the signal scramblers starting to degrade. These Ravern systems aren't built for subtlety. I give us maybe 5 minutes before they notice something's off. 5 minutes is all I need, Buzz said, grinning despite the strain in his voice. He adjusted their trajectory, guiding the shuttle into the shadow of a jagged ravine where the Ravern fortress loomed like a monolith of living metal. The fortress pulsated with alien life, its structure shifting and regenerating as if it were a breathing organism. Bioorganic spires rose into the sky, crowned with glowing nodules that Jack guessed were sensors or weapons, probably both. Beneath it, the terrain writhed with movement, thousands of Ravern soldiers scuttling like insects, their chitinous forms blending into the pulsating ground. As the shuttle descended, the team braced themselves. The moment the landing struts touched the ground, Jack barked, "Move." The ramp lowered with a hiss, and the squad poured out, weapons drawn. Heavy took point, his massive frame hunched as he carried a railgun almost too big for a human to wield. Marcus was right behind him, carrying a modified Coalition scanner rigged to detect Ravern energy signatures. Harper stayed close to the middle, his eyes darting across the terrain as he clutched a small portable terminal. Buzz brought up the rear, a compact blaster in one hand and a satchel of explosives slung over his shoulder. Jack led them toward a ridge overlooking the fortress. He crouched low, gesturing for the others to do the same. The air buzzed with the faint, rhythmic hum of the Ravern hive mind, an almost imperceptible vibration that seemed to reverberate through the very ground they walked on. It was unsettling, alien in every sense of the word. Marcus knelt beside him, his scanner glowing faintly. Energy readings are off the charts. That fortress isn't just a command center. It's a nerve hub. It's syncing with the entire hive. Good, Jack said. If we take it out, The whole system crashes. Assuming we live long enough to do that, Harper muttered. Heavy smirked, hefting his railgun. We'll live. They won't. Jack scanned the terrain again. The fortress was surrounded by a writhing sea of Ravern soldiers, their exoskeletons glinting in the pale green light. A direct assault was suicide. Fortunately, that wasn't the plan. Buzz, Jack said, nodding toward the explosives strapped across his chest. Buzz grinned. You want fireworks? I'll give you fireworks. While the others provided cover, Buzz crept along the ridge, his movements uncharacteristically cautious. He planted a series of charges along a line of natural rock formations that overlooked a key patrol route. The Ravern below remained oblivious, their rigid formations moving in precise, predictable patterns. When Buzz returned, Jack gave the signal. With a flick of his wrist, Buzz detonated the charges. The resulting explosion sent massive chunks of rock crashing down, obliterating a dozen Ravern patrols and throwing the remaining forces into temporary disarray. Move, Jack ordered, and the team sprinted toward the fortress. They reached the outer perimeter as the first wave of Ravern reinforcements arrived, screeching and chittering in unison. Heavy turned, his railgun roaring to life. The weapon's kinetic projectiles tore through the Ravern ranks, each shot leaving a trail of mangled exoskeletons in its wake. They're adapting, Marcus warned, his scanner flashing red. They're reconfiguring their tactics. Then we keep them guessing, Jack said. Marcus, find us an entry point. Buzz, get ready to blow it open. As Marcus scanned the fortress's exterior, Jack and Heavy laid down covering fire. Harper worked furiously at his terminal, hacking into the fortress's network. He frowned as alien symbols flooded his screen. Their security's more advanced than I thought. I can disrupt their sensor grid, but it won't last long. Do it, Jack said. A ripple of energy pulsed through the air as Harper's hack took effect. The fortress's sensors flickered, and Marcus pointed to a section of the wall where the biometal looked thinner. There. It's a maintenance hatch, but it's shielded. Buzz was already moving, planting a cluster of shaped charges along the hatch. He stepped back and detonated them, the explosion carving a molten hole through the fortress's outer shell. The team rushed inside, moving through dark, organic corridors that pulsed with a sickly green light. The walls were alive, shifting and contracting as if sensing their presence. Marcus's scanner beeped furiously. We're close to the core. Energy readings are spiking. Stay sharp, Jack said. The hive mind won't let us get there without a fight. As if on cue, the wall split open, and Ravern soldiers poured out. They moved in eerie synchronization, their movements almost too fast to track. Heavy opened fire, his railgun lighting up the corridor. Marcus rigged a makeshift EMP grenade from a coalition scanner, tossing it into the fray. The resulting blast disrupted the Ravern's coordination, sending them stumbling. Keep moving, Jack shouted, leading the charge. They reached a central chamber, where a massive bioorganic structure pulsed with energy. This was the heart of the hive mind's coordination, the prime cortex. Harper, you're up, Jack said, covering the scientist as he approached the cortex. Harper connected his terminal to the alien structure, his fingers flying across the keys. I need 2 minutes. Maybe less. Make it less, Jack said, firing at a Ravern soldier that lunged toward them. The chamber filled with the sound of gunfire and alien screeches as the team held their ground. Marcus rigged another EMP device, throwing it into a cluster of incoming soldiers. Buzz set up explosives along the walls, muttering, If we're going out with style. Harper's voice cut through the chaos. Done. The system's destabilizing, but we need to get clear before it collapses. Everyone out, Jack ordered. As they ran, the fortress began to shake, the hive mind synchronization breaking down. Ravern soldiers turned on each other, their movements erratic and disjointed. Buzz detonated his charges, bringing the chamber down behind them as they escaped through the maintenance hatch. Outside, the Ravern forces were in complete disarray. The hive mind was collapsing, and the once coordinated army had devolved into chaos. Jack glanced at his team, battered but alive. For now, they had done the impossible. But the mission wasn't over yet. The ground shuddered beneath their boots as Jack, and his team sprinted away from the collapsing fortress. Behind them, the Ravern structure imploded in a cascade of green light and biometal shards, its destruction rippling through the landscape. For a brief, harrowing moment, Jack wondered if the shockwave might overtake them, but they managed to dive behind a jagged outcrop just as the debris surged past. Gasping for breath, Jack scanned his squad. Sound off. Still here, Marcus called, brushing dirt off his scanner. Never better, Buzz quipped, though his limp suggested otherwise. Intact, Harper replied tersely, cradling his portable terminal. Heavy grunted, his railgun slung across his back. Good to go. Jack nodded. They were battered and bruised, but alive. More than he could have hoped for when the mission started. Still, their work wasn't done. The Ravern forces might be in chaos, but the hive mind's death throes were unpredictable. Harper adjusted his glasses, sweat streaking his soot-covered face. The fortress core's destruction triggered a cascading failure across the local network. The hive mind's coordination in this sector is collapsing, but it's not complete. We've destabilized a node, not the entire system. Jack rose to his feet, scanning the horizon where swarms of Ravern soldiers writhed in confusion. Without their hive mind's iron grip, the creatures flailed and clashed, some tearing into one another, while others simply froze in place. Yet here and there, clusters were starting to regroup. What's their fallback? Jack asked, his voice grim. Harper frowned. Localized subcommanders, independent drones capable of partial coordination. They won't be as efficient, but if enough of them rally the troops, we're back to square one. Marcus checked his scanner, his brow furrowing. I'm picking up signals from a nearby Ravern outpost. Looks like a cluster of those subcommanders is converging there. Buzz exhaled sharply, already slinging his explosives satchel back into place. Guess we're going for round 2. Jack smirked faintly. Not if we stop them first. He turned to Harper. Can you override the hive mind's local frequencies? Jam their ability to coordinate? Harper hesitated. In theory, yes. But I'd need time and a secure location to set up a transmission relay. Out here, it's a coin toss whether I can even get a stable signal. Then we buy you time, Jack said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Heavy flexed his shoulders, his railgun humming to life. I'll clear a path. They moved quickly, cutting across the terrain toward the outpost. Ravern soldiers scuttled aimlessly, their movements jerky and erratic. Some turned toward the humans, but without unified strategy. They were little more than an annoyance. Heavy dispatched them with brutal efficiency, his railgun firing in rhythmic bursts that echoed through the alien landscape. The outpost came into view, a smaller but no less grotesque structure of living metal. Unlike the fortress, this one seemed hastily assembled, its spires less refined and its defenses sporadic. Yet the movement within it was undeniable. Subcommanders were gathering, their energy signatures pulsing like dark beacons. We're on borrowed time, Marcus warned, his scanner flickering with increasing activity. If those subcommanders establish a new node, we lose our edge. Harper dropped to one knee, pulling his terminal from his pack. I'll need 5 minutes to override their frequencies. You've got 3, Jack said, gesturing for the others to spread out. Marcus, find us weak points in the outpost's defenses. Heavy, keep their forces off Harper. Buzz, plant charges in case we need to take the whole place down. And you? Buzz asked, already moving toward the perimeter. Jack smirked faintly. I'll handle improvisation. As Harper set to work, Jack and the others fanned out. Marcus hacked into a Ravern relay station, rerouting power to overload their perimeter shields. Heavy took up a defensive position near Harper, mowing down any Ravern drones that stumbled too close. Buzz darted between cover, his hands moving with practiced precision as he placed explosives along the outpost's foundation. Inside the structure, the subcommanders began to stir. Unlike the drones outside, these creatures moved with unsettling purpose, their movements synchronized despite the hive mind's disruption. Jack felt the shift before he saw it, an almost imperceptible rhythm returning to the enemy's actions. They're rallying, Marcus shouted. Harper, how much longer? 2 minutes. Harper snapped, his fingers flying over his keyboard. "Make it one," Jack barked, leveling his rifle at a Ravern drone that had managed to flank them. He fired, the creature collapsing in a heap of chitin and viscous fluid. Buzz's voice crackled over the comms. "Charges are set. Just say the word." "Hold off," Jack ordered. "We need that override first." The ground beneath them trembled as a massive Ravern subcommander emerged from the outpost. It towered over its drones, its segmented body bristling with organic weaponry. Heavy immediately opened fire, his railgun's kinetic rounds slamming into the creature's armored hide. "Focus fire on the big one," Jack commanded, joining Heavy in pouring fire into the subcommander. The creature shrieked, its carapace splintering under the sustained barrage. But it wasn't enough. It charged forward, its massive claws raking through the ground. Jack barely dodged in time, rolling to his feet and firing at its exposed joints. "Harper!" Jack shouted. "We're out of time." "Done," Harper yelled triumphantly. "Initiating the override now." A low-frequency pulse emanated from Harper's terminal, sweeping across the battlefield like an invisible wave. The effect was immediate. The Ravern drones froze mid-motion, their coordination severed once again. The subcommander faltered, its movements growing erratic as it thrashed blindly. "Buzz now," Jack ordered. Buzz grinned and detonated the charges. The outpost erupted in a fiery explosion, the shockwave toppling the subcommander and scattering the remaining drones. The team shielded themselves from the blast, the heat washing over them like a furnace. When the dust settled, the battlefield was silent. The Ravern forces lay in disarray, their attempts to regroup utterly thwarted. Jack rose slowly, surveying the destruction. "Is it over?" Marcus asked, his voice cautious. "For now," Jack replied, turning to Harper. "How long will your override hold?" "Long enough for the coalition to mop up what's left," Harper said, his expression weary but triumphant. Jack nodded, a rare smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Then we've done our job." The squad regrouped, battered but victorious. As they boarded their shuttle, Jack couldn't help but glance back at the shattered remains of the outpost. Humanity had been thrown into the war as a last resort, a desperate gamble by a skeptical coalition. But in 5 hours, they had done what no other species had managed. They had turned the tide. As the shuttle lifted off, Buzz broke the silence. 5 hours, huh? Think they'll give us a medal?" Jack chuckled, his exhaustion evident. "Let's see if they survive our debriefing first." The team laughed, their camaraderie unshaken despite the odds they had faced. They had proven humanity's worth, not with overwhelming force, but with ingenuity, adaptability, and grit. The Ravern War wasn't over, but for the first time, the galaxy had hope, and it had humans to thank for it.